Britain's first new nuclear plant to be built in a generation gets the go-ahead. Hinkley Point C in Somerset was finally given the green light today from the government with new conditions. The opposition say, though, nothing has changed.
This statement is window dressing. It is face-saving by a government that talked big and eventually backed down with a whimper.
Also this lunchtime, can the BBC keep its talent? The Director-General says publishing the pay of more stars won't make it easy. Austerity cuts leave the elderly struggling and many care homes on the brink of collapse. And
I'm quite tired at the moment. 24-hour sailing does that to you.
The schoolboy on an extended summer holiday sailing the North Pole to raise awareness of climate change.
This is ITV News with Charlene White.
Good afternoon. It's supposed to power our country for decades, but Hinkley Point C is already creating its own political heat. Today, the Prime Minister finally approved the building of the new nuclear power station after pausing negotiations in July, just as the deal was being finalised. She signed it off with conditions, though, but Labour claims the concessions already existed. Unions have welcomed the thousands of new jobs that will come with the project. Environmentalists say we're overpaying for the privilege. We'll be live at the plant in Somerset in a moment. Plus, we'll have more analysis here in the studio on what it'll mean for the country. But first, Paul Davis has the details of the deal.
Work at Hinkley Point never actually stopped, but preparations on the site of the new nuclear plant can now be ramped up, with the government giving it the go-ahead, having inserted a few new conditions in a deal that will see Chinese and French investment to provide Britain's power.
The Prime Minister made a commitment that a decision will be taken by the end of September. It has, and I think the safeguards that are being proposed are sensible. They are in line with what other countries have.
Today's new deal means the government will be able to intervene if French energy giant EDF ever decides to sell Hinkley Point. It's also changing its approach over the ownership and control of what it calls the country's critical infrastructure to make sure our national security isn't put at risk. But there's no change to the fee agreed for the energy produced at Hinkley Point, which critics believe is too high. While the government says it's right to be cautious about foreign involvement in such vital infrastructure, Labour today said its new conditions didn't add up to much.
In the end, all they've done is pretend to give themselves powers which they already possessed. This statement is window dressing. It is face-saving by a government that talked big and eventually backed down with a whimper.
Conditions or not, Greenpeace don't want a new nuclear plant and handed in a 300,000 signature petition to that effect.
The main thing is that no one has discovered what to do about the waste. We're leaving a legacy of toxic nuclear waste for generations to come.
EDF predictably were talking the deal up.
First of all, I would like to say very clearly how delighted I am that the government has taken this decision. It's great news for the customers, it's a big boost for the UK industry.
The go-ahead has also been welcomed by the unions, who say it creates 25,000 jobs. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Well, our correspondent Rupert Evelyn is at the site in Somerset. Paul Davis just touched on new jobs there. How much impact is this likely to have in the local area?
I think it's fair to say the impact is simply vast. For the local town, Bridgewater, I think you could argue this is like winning the lottery ticket for this county of Somerset. I was there early this morning. I've been to a factory where they make electrical distribution switch gear. And, you know, for workers on the shop floor there, I think this is really a great day.
Obviously, it's making everyone feel more secure in the area. I think it's only a good thing that could happen to us, and hopefully for us as a company it'd go up and up.
It's the biggest engineering project the UK's taken on in quite some years, so to be a part of it's quite a privilege, so we're really excited about it.
For the owner of that company, this is a real opportunity for expansion, and assuming that he gets the contracts, there's a fair chance he will, then I think what the plan is there, and for many other companies, is to grow their businesses.
Yeah, we have plans. We're looking to build a new factory that's 2.5 times the size of this. That's not just for Hinkley Point, but we want to be able to make sure that we can not only service Hinkley Point, but we can also continue servicing our long-term customers.
You said that jobs-wise, locally, it's like having a winning lottery ticket. So when is the work due to start?
Well, in essence, it is already underway, and it has been for quite a long time. But today's announcement really rubber stamps the deal, and it allows full-on work to get going. And that means that not only just the infrastructure of this entire county, but, you know, thousands of people are going to need to be housed, they're going to need to be fed, they're going to need to have all the various things that just human beings require. And a lot of that can now be put in place. And that will allow for, I think, what you will find a real boon for this economy here in Somerset.
Rupert, thanks. Well, we're joined now by Claire Jacobson, who's head of Climate, Energy and Environment Policy at the manufacturers organisation EEF. Thanks so much for coming in to talk to us. You're in favour of Hinkley. Why?
Well, first and foremost, this is a positive announcement for industry. This deal has been some 10 years in the making, and it's about time that we had some clarity and certainty in the future trajectory of energy policy, and this deal provides that.
Is it positive for industry, though, because nuclear power is becoming more expensive, and with power stations due to close by the time Hinkley actually opens, it doesn't look like it's going to get any cheaper, though, does it?
In terms of price, there are two issues here. There is security of supply and there is value for money. We have Hinkley Point provides 7% of the capacity going forward. Now, that is an important part of the mix. In terms of the cost and the price of energy, yes, there are many players in the mix. But in terms of the opportunities within the supply chain, for the longer term, this is a really, really good news story for manufacturing.
And renewable energy, is that not something that's good for the long term in terms of the UK as a whole?
Absolutely, but it's part and parcel of the package that we are talking about here. Renewables is an intermittent form of technology. There are still costs that need to come down, and over the long term, that may well happen. But we need these decisions now to give us that short-term trajectory on energy security.
You say that we have the time. I mean, it's probably not going to open until at the earliest 2026. So it's not as though this is something that's going to open up next week, is it? So should renewable then not be given a chance? Because technology, at the rate in which it's improving, by the time this opens, actually renewable energy may well actually be the answer.
Well, I think they go together. This is not an either or. This is both hand in hand. We need both to fulfil that energy capacity need. And in the short term, there are things like gas. We have a capacity market that is taking place in the coming years. That should provide some of the answers that we're talking about here.
OK, well, Claire, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, let's get a final thought on this story from our political correspondent, Carl Dinnan, who's at Westminster. Carl, it was a big surprise when Theresa May paused this decision. So is this new deal very different at all, or is it just window dressing?
Well, the controversial Chinese involvement is the same, the tricky new reactor design is the same, and the expensive electricity we'll all have to pay for from this is the same. So I think this is essentially the same deal with a few very minor tweaks, perhaps. What is different, according to the government, is how future deals will be done and those protections that they want to give to critical national infrastructure. Although, as you heard in Paul Davis's report, Labour say the government already has that power and therefore it is window dressing. Slightly more interesting political question, I think, though, is what this delay says about our new Prime Minister. Did Theresa May look at this deal and decide it's good as it is, I'll stick with it? Or did she look at it and see all the money that had already been spent and the importance the Chinese now have to our economy post-Brexit and decide she didn't have any choice and she'd have to stick with it? And I don't have an answer to that one yet.
Right, Carl, thank you very much. Still to come this lunchtime, why many older people are missing out on crucial care because of where they live.
And I'll be live from North Wales talking to households who've been told their bins will only be collected once a month.
But first, the boss of the BBC has hit back at plans for it to reveal the salaries of all staff who earn over £150,000 a year. The broadcaster has been ordered by the government to disclose the pay of more than 100 TV and radio presenters within the next year. But the Director General, Lord Hall, has responded by saying it'd make it very difficult to hold on to the stars the public love. Our political correspondent, Libby Vina, has more.
After losing its primetime hit Bake Off, the BBC has been forced to eat more humble pie. Under its new charter, it's been ordered to publish the salaries of all those earning more than £150,000 a year. A recipe for hemorrhaging talent, says its Director General. While welcoming the overall settlement, Tony Hall said, the BBC is already incredibly transparent and we publish what we spend on talent pay, a bill which has fallen in recent years. The BBC operates in a competitive market and this will not make it easier for the BBC to retain the talent the public love. In the Commons, the Culture Secretary insisted the changes would help the BBC flourish.
The BBC is one of this country's greatest achievements and greatest treasures. These reforms ensure that it will continue to be cherished at home and abroad for many years to come.
But not all Tory MPs are convinced.
I do not share this unhealthy obsession with what other people earn. I was always told it was rude to ask.
Previously, only the salaries of big-name stars such as Claudia Winkleman and Gary Lineker were set to be made public. The BBC will now publish the salaries of around 100 employees, including newsreaders and journalists.
The BBC will be forced to reveal the salaries of many of its more mediocre but overpaid employees, and there may be some national teeth gnashing as a result when they discover exactly what goes on behind closed doors.
One victory for the BBC, it will now appoint most of the members of its new board, helping to bolster its independence. Libby Vina, ITV News, Westminster.
2 people have been shot dead in North London this morning. Police were called to a property in East Finchley just before 6:30 with reports 2 people had been injured. A man and a woman with gunshot wounds were pronounced dead at the scene. No one has been arrested as yet. And British tourists are believed to have been caught up in a deadly explosion on a passenger ferry in Indonesia. A German woman has reportedly died and several tourists were injured when the boat's engine exploded while carrying people between Bali and a nearby island. The elderly are bearing the brunt of cuts to social care. That's according to a new report. The study from 2 health charities found the care and support given to older people in England depends on where they live and how much money they have. It also warns that more care homes are likely to go bust in the future. Vicky Grimes reports.
Hi, Dad. Jacqueline started caring for her father after he was diagnosed with dementia in 2012. She had to move in with him to make sure he was safe in his own home.
It came to head that I had to move in with him when we had a phone call from the police that they had Dad at the police station because someone had seen him riding his bicycle down the motorway.
Her father's just one of those who need care and support to carry out basic tasks, but a new report says cuts to social care are affecting those who really need it.
We know that at least 250,000 fewer people are now accessing local government support for help with their social care. And by that we mean the everyday essentials like getting out of bed in the morning or somebody coming to help you eat your dinner. So this is really shocking. And what we don't know is actually what's happening to those people. Are they more reliant now on their families and friends to act as carers? Are they paying for somebody to come in and support them, which, by the way, is very expensive? Or what we know is happening is that a growing number of people are just going without.
Over the past 5 years, local authority spending on care facilities and services for older and disabled people has fallen by 25%, whilst the number of people aged over 65 being helped by the council has dropped by 26%. And more than 1 million people with care needs now don't receive any help at all. The Department of Health says it understands the social care system is under pressure and that this government is committed to ensuring those in old age throughout the country can get affordable and dignified care. But for Jacqueline, caring for her father and juggling life remain a struggle. Victoria Grimes, ITV News.
Research by ITV News has revealed millions of households could soon be facing dramatic changes to how their rubbish is removed, with many councils planning collections just once a month. Councils say the cuts are crucial to save money and meet environmental targets, but the controversial plans have left many residents furious. Our consumer editor Chris Choi is in Conwy in North Wales. Chris, tell us what's happening where you are.
Well, this is what it's all about, the traditional old black bin. Thousands of residents in this area are being told that these will only be collected once every 4 weeks. You can imagine that's led to many misgivings, and we have research, as you indicated, that this is happening and being considered around the country. So why? Well, earlier I spoke to the head of neighbourhood services for Conwy Council, Andrew Wilkinson.
We are putting things in landfill that shouldn't be there. We've done an analysis of what's in our wheelie bins, and what we found was that over half of what's in the wheelie bins could have been recycled by our curbside collection service.
Are the locals on board, Chris?
Well, there are the kinds of fears that you might imagine, that there'll be more fly tipping, more vermin around here. Near to the coast, more seagulls attacking rubbish. What the council says is that it will collect recyclable waste and food waste on a weekly basis, but you'll have to wait longer for the black bins, and many residents are unhappy. Earlier, I spoke to Graham Gibbons.
If you leave places like this, it's not going to have a good effect on tourism, on the locals, on anything. We've got a store here, and if you've got food and stuff lying all over the road, it's just not going to be good.
Well, in fact, I've just spoken to another resident who's told me that this is starting in his street, and he's going to start locking up his black bin because he fears that neighbours will start to use other people's once the system comes in. Now, we have research that Conwy is far from being alone. Just take a look at our research. Fife started a monthly bin collection trial last September. Although it was controversial, others are now following. Conwy here, its new system will affect 10,000 households. In October, Falkirk will become the first UK council to fully roll out monthly bin collections for all of its 70,000 households. And our research shows other councils around the country are cutting fortnightly collections and shifting to rubbish removal every 3 weeks. That includes Oldham and Anglesey, so you can see very clearly this is likely to be an issue not just here, but in other locations around Britain.
Indeed, Chris, thank you. Well, if you want to see if your council is making changes to collection times, you can find out on our website at itv.com/news. The group that owns John Lewis has announced an almost 15% drop in half-year pre-tax profits, but say the results are not linked to the EU referendum result. The group, which also owns Waitrose, says the slide in pre-tax profits was caused by deep structural changes in the retail market, and the decision to leave the EU has had little impact on sales so far. And Prince Harry is celebrating his 32nd birthday. The royal, who's fifth in line to the throne, is back in the UK for his special day after spending the summer in Africa, where he was working to relocate hundreds of elephants to save them from poachers. Well, we've compiled photos of Harry through the years, from when he was a baby to present day. So you can see them on our website, itv.com/news. Finally, most teenagers are back in school after the summer break, but 14-year-old Benji Edwards is still off, instead learning all about the North Pole in the North Pole. He's the youngest person ever to sail the area. Benji's travelled northeast, above Russia and around past Canada. That's not usually possible. It's only happened now because of the amount of Arctic ice that's melting. Benji wanted to highlight that issue, and on his journey has recorded an exclusive video diary for ITV News from the waters. Nazanin Mashiri has his story.
It is really nice to have achieved what we set out to. We've done the northeast and northwest passages in one season.
Sailing into the record books, Ben Edwards, or Benji, is the youngest person ever to sail around the North Pole. His achievement all the more impressive because Benji is in pain a lot of the time. He has an inflamed gut. One of the motivations for the trip is to raise money for research into the condition.
I'm quite tired at the moment. 24-hour sailing does that to you. But I should be able to get over it.
Benji took time off school to take part. He has the entire GCSE syllabus on board, but he hasn't had much time to read. This aluminium-hulled yacht, the Northabout, has weathered many storms and strong winds. Many kids Benji's age have never been away from home, but Benji has remained cheerful despite the dangerous and cramped conditions.
This is my bunk. I think I've probably got the smallest of all the beds on the boat, and I quite like it.
And there have been some magical moments too. A group of dolphins kept the boat company for a while. Benji and the rest of the crew have broken another record. They've sailed the North Pole in a single summer. They could only make it round so quickly because of the receding ice, one of the devastating effects of global warming, something Benji has seen firsthand.
Ordinarily, the Kara Sea would be full of ice at this time of year, but because of temperature changes in the last decade, it's completely clear.
Benji and the crew will now begin their long journey home to Bristol. It was an experience of a lifetime and the last great challenge of polar exploration. The leader of the mission says Benji went off a young boy and will return a man. Nazanin Mashiri, ITV News.
A reminder of our main stories. The government has confirmed the Hinkley C nuclear power station will go ahead following a new agreement with EDF. The £18 billion project will create 26,000 jobs. The boss of the BBC has hit back at plans for it to reveal the salaries of all those who earn over £150,000 a year. The broadcaster has been ordered to do so by the Culture Secretary within the next year. And a new report is today warning that elderly people are being put at risk as a result of cuts to social care in England. Well, that's it from us this lunchtime. The ITV Evening News is back at 6:30. The weather's next, then the news where you are. But from everyone here on the team, enjoy your afternoon. Goodbye.